Um, so, okay, just in time for me to make an announcement. So next Thursday, we're actually screening a program of holiday shorts on Thursday at 7 p.m. at Maryland Hall. It's a really fun program that I curated, a mix of a short that won our audience award this year. It's a French-Canadian short. There's a short that won a Student Academy Award. There's a couple animated shorts, and then there's a really charming musical documentary called Dreaming of a Jewish Christmas, all about how a lot of the secular Christmas carols were written by Jewish people and just how they helped to make the holiday more inclusive to all faiths and ethnicities. So it's a really fun, inspiring documentary. So that whole program will take place on Thursday at 7 p.m. at Maryland Hall. And so you could get your tickets now. But
Great.
Anyways, that's all for me. The Real Film Festival will be taking place March 31st through April 3rd. So we're excited to be celebrating our 10th anniversary. Hope you all can make it. And now back to you and HUD.
Thank you, Derek. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I thought, well, I got you here, we should talk a little bit about the festival. So thank you. And I'll probably be talking to you as it gets closer, especially for our local people. Yeah, very, very excited about that and glad to have Derek with us tonight. All right,
Derek,
so
one second, Derek, if you have a link to the event Thursday, you could, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, that would be great.
I will do that. And I think if you go to the website and sign up for the newsletter as well, you'll get these announcements. But yes, I will put that in the great idea. I'll put that in the chat.
Okay. Super. All right. Well, it's great to see everybody for tonight's edition of The Great Movies, a discussion of HUD from 1963. And I think everybody here knows the drill, but I'll go through it anyway. So before we get to our discussion, my name is Andy Wolverton, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by my co-host and partner in crime, Darnice Jasper. Darnice and I are both librarians in the Anne Arundel County, Maryland Public Library System, which sponsors this program. So the next time we get together virtually will be to kick off 2022. And we're going to do that on Friday, January the 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern, when we discuss Stella Dallas from 1937, starring Miss Barbara Stanwyck. You can start signing up on December the 30th. And let me throw that link into the chat right now so you can bookmark that. And there we go. All right, so there is the link. And pardon my technical problems here. Okay, so if you are new to our discussions, we're glad to have everybody along. And if you want to sign up for our email list, you can send me an email at awolverton@aacpl.net. That way you'll get all the news about our upcoming programs before anybody else. Also, please know that we want as many people participating as possible tonight. So if you have a question or comment, please raise your hand, real or virtual, or use the chat feature, and Darnice will work you into the conversation. We also ask that you please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And as I mentioned before, we are recording tonight. Okay, I think that's it for announcements. Anybody have any questions? Okay, then let us jump in. So how many people watched HUD for the first time in preparation for tonight's discussion? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, a pretty fair number. Okay, so most people, when this film came out, didn't realize that it was going to be a key movie in preparing audiences for the rest of the 1960s, not only in film, but also in society. One critic called HUD a warning shot for the 1960s. Another called it angst in the midst of authority, the generation gap, and the last gasp of the Old West. Now, despite the wonderful cinematography by James Long Howe, there's really nothing glamorous about these characters. The film also subverts the concept of the Western hero. Hud is certainly nothing like Will Kane, played by Gary Cooper in High Noon, which was about 10 years previous, or the title character played by Alan Ladd in Shane, which also stars Brandon deWilde. Director Martin Ritt wanted the character of Hud to be an anti-hero who had no regrets at the end of the film. Paul Newman saw the role as that of a villain, an absolutely worthless human being with no moral compass whatsoever. Part of what Newman wanted was to be identified with a role that did not present him as a hero. So he was absolutely stunned to learn that many young people had posters of Hud in their rooms, seeing him as a role model. Now, the atmosphere on the set was friendly but professional, but there weren't many laughs. Melvyn Douglas was suffering from a heart condition, and Patricia Neal was in the middle of a stormy marriage to writer Roald Dahl and was still trying to come to grips with the death of her 7-year-old daughter. Now, according to Douglas, Paul Newman off camera was very shy and withdrawn, but Newman was so in character that when Neal opened up to him about the death of her daughter, Newman stared at her for a long moment and simply said, "Tough," and walked away. Yet, Neal stated in her autobiography that she and Newman worked together beautifully. Now, when the Paramount executives saw the finished film, they were not happy. They thought it was too dark, they didn't like Hal's cinematography, and they certainly didn't like the fact that there was no remorse from or comeuppance for the character of Hud. Paramount's head of production asked Ritt to change the ending, but Ritt and Newman decided they liked it as it was. Paramount was ready to drop the entire project, but Ritt flew to New York and talked to the executives into releasing the film unchanged. Hud predates a similar film, The Last Picture Show, by 8 years. That film was set in the 50s, but Hud, based on a 1961 novel called Horsemen Pass By Larry McMurtry, is set in or near the time of its release in 1963. Now, while The Last Picture Show is a sadder, or at least a more melancholy film, it also deals with the death of the West and portrays a change in traditional values and mores. Yet Hud is an angrier film, and some audiences were offended by the title character, while others embraced it. Director Martin Ritt said in an interview, "I kept getting mail telling me what a great guy Hud was, and what a schmuck the old man was, and that the kid was gay. What nobody realized was that Haight-Ashbury was just around the corner, and there's no way of topping history. What nobody realized was that kids were that cynical." I got news for you, Martin. They are. Hud was very successful at the box office and was nominated for 7 Oscars, winning for Patricia Neal for Best Actress with only 22 minutes of screen time, Melvyn Douglas for Best Supporting Actor, and James Wong Howe for Black and White Cinematography. Paul Newman was nominated for Best Actor, losing to Sidney Poitier for The Lilies of the Field. Newman was nominated for Oscars 10 times in his career, winning only 1 Oscar that wasn't an honorary or a humanitarian award. He won that Oscar for The Color of Money in 1987. Okay, I'm talked enough, and now it's time for you to talk. Let's hear your thoughts about Hud.
Okay, Bill?
I had a lot of trouble watching the movie. You know, no redeeming character. He had nothing redeeming about him at all. And when we got to the end and they had to kill the cattle, that was the worst scene. Fortunately, they didn't show anything actually being killed, but it's still it was just really tough to watch. I read some of those things too, and I guess it's just Paul Newman in so many roles has been so likable that people must identify. I don't get why they would be so enamored by him otherwise. But anyhow, tough time watching it.
Okay, yeah. I totally understand, Bill. Thank you.
Susan?
Yeah. Well, I got a couple of comments about, I guess, from a woman's point of view with Paul Newman. Women sort of like that bad boy thing. And I can kind of understand why, from a man's point of view, they would have been repulsed by his character. But even Patricia Neal's character in the movie, Alma, had a certain attraction for him. My feeling about the movie is it really was a movie about her character more than anything. And she was like the glue or the center point of what everything revolved around. And she was the one that instigated the moral choice that the boy made after that rape scene, when he realized he didn't want to be like Hud anymore.
Yeah, great point. I do want to spend more time as we go talking about not only the character of Alma, but also Patricia Neal's portrayal of that. Yeah, great stuff, Susan. Thank you.
So I've got Sue, Joyce, Jan, and John.
Oh, in watching this, I just was so perplexed. And actually, I kept going over it and over it in my mind, because while Hud was supposed to be so bad, I kept seeing him as sometimes good. And what really struck me is that one scene with the father, where Hud's going around thinking the father hates him because of the car crash. But in fact, his father has never liked him. He says, oh, it started a long time before that. So this is your child, and somehow, as a kid, a small kid, he can't stand him. I mean, wait a minute. This, I think this man's wonderful. He's got all his principles, but that's not so wonderful. That you've decided that your child is evil, and of course, then what does a child do but live up to that expectation? So, okay, now I begin to see, for example, when the father falls over and it collapses, Hud rushes over. Well, a guy that's really not just sullen, but not just angry, but hateful and really cruel wouldn't do that. They wouldn't rush over to help. And why is it when, okay, the women love him, but why is it when he's in the bar or he walks into a store, people say, hi, Hud, hi, Hud. Well, I mean, if he was such a benevolent person in small towns, I don't think people do that. So I really think it's a very dark, complex, psychological, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but he has been really pushed towards, I mean, he's got this very strong personality. He's going to go one way or the other. So, and obviously he's very smart in terms of money. So he moves to the wild guy type of person without any love or affection or support. So it was a really mixed portrayal where I felt the father had a lot to do with the way the HUD turned out. That's what I think.
Wonderful stuff. There's so much, like you said, there's so much in there that we don't know about the father's relationship to HUD's brother or Lon's father. They don't really dwell on that very much, so we don't know what happened earlier, but it really doesn't matter because we know these characters so well. We feel like we can fill in some of that backstory on our own because the characters are so good. But you bring in a lot of interesting things, Sue, that I hope we're going to explore a little bit more. So let me go to the next person. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Joyce, go ahead.
Well, I love HUD. I think I've seen it about 4 times. I want to pick up what Sue said about the relationship with the father and the brother and HUD. Yeah, this time I didn't, watching it again, I went in thinking that, the father and HUD had this awful contentious relationship because of the death of the brother. I'd forgotten what Melvyn Douglas said about, you know, it was before that event that, you know, he just didn't seem to like HUD from the beginning. But so that really gave me pause. I had to think about that. And Sue talked about that brilliantly, but then and what you just said, Andy, we don't really know about the brother that was killed in the car wreck, Lon's father. But HUD did say they used to pal around and booze it up and have bar fights together, had a great time together. So it is very puzzling, but I love that. It makes you think and go beyond what's put before you. But I just thought that the 4 leads, what wonderful, I mean, wonderful acting, I think, as far much as I know, but just great characters, you know, and I just, the young guy, Lonnie, I did learn, I was like, where'd this kid come from? But so I read just a teeny bit about him, but I gather he died very young himself. But I thought he was fabulous. And just the beginning of the movie with the black and white and the emptiness, the dried, you know, dusty desolation. Oh God, that was so great. I just love that. So I just love the movie. As far as HUD's character himself, I mean, he was like, was it Sue said about the small town kind of thing, or was whoever said it? And he's charming. You know, I mean, you might be mad at him if he slept with your wife, but like he seemed to do, but you know, and I was taking notes a little bit as I watched last night, and one thing I wrote down, he is just gorgeous. He just is. You know?
I don't think anybody's going to dispute that.
But it's just, the character is perplexing, but that's a great thing watching a movie for me. You know.
Yeah, it is.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Joyce.
Thank you, Joyce.
Okay, Jan.
Well, when I first saw this, I just viewed him as a despicable character. This go round, I kind of went between he's a sociopath to, at the end of the movie, I felt he kind of liked being the bad boy. And by that, I mean his choice of women. He went after married women. He took the bad route, but he kind of liked that role. Although when he pulls the shade down at the end of the movie, I thought, you know, he's left with nothing. His father's gone. The nephew who adored him in the beginning, he's gone. He's lost him. The one woman who maybe he could have had a relationship, she's gone. He's left with nothing. So I felt a tiny bit sorry for him at the end. But the other comment I had, and I don't always pay attention to this in movies, was the cinematography. I thought it was stunning. Early on, there's a scene, it was only about 5 minutes in. I even wrote myself a note as I was watching the movie, when the first cow is found dead. And they come up and there's a tree, I don't know if anybody saw it, filled with buzzards waiting to go after the cow. I mean, it had a little bit of a Hitchcock flavor of it to come in a few years with the birds, but what a scene that was. And somebody mentioned the cattle killing scene, but we don't see it, thankfully. But the angle with that it was filmed at, where you see them shooting, I think was more of an impact. So in addition to the acting, to me, what really stood out was the cinematography and the bleakness of the fields and everything. So impressive movie. I see why it got the awards.
Okay, thank you, Jan.
Definitely. John's next.
Yeah, like Joyce, I think Brandon deWilde's performance in the movie is really, really remarkable. The fact that he was still very young when he was in it, and holding up against Paul Newman and Melvyn Douglas. I actually thought that he and Melvyn Douglas had a certain rapport, but I read when I was looking online that Melvyn Douglas said that he was a rather moody and somewhat mercurial person. So I'm not sure what to make of that, whether Douglas was criticizing him or just pointing out that he was a typical teenager. But his performance, and when you think about the role he played in Shane, you know, the world lost a great actor when he died in that car accident. But I want to get, if you know, if people don't mind, just talking about it as a Western for a minute, because I really love Westerns. I've always loved them since I was a child. And I have a fun fact to add along with that. I saw The Last Picture Show when it came out in Washington. And that also was based on a book written by Larry McMurtry, by the way. Right. Probably most of you already know that. But what you might not have known was that he had a bookstore in Georgetown called Booked Up. And he was there himself. I mean, here's a guy, and this was right around the time the Last Picture Show had shown and had gotten a lot of attention, a lot of positive attention. Ben Johnson won the Academy Award for the role that he played, you know, a great iconic Western actor, especially in John Ford films. And I think that kind of relaunched his career. Johnson didn't want to act in it because of all the dirty language, but he did, and it paid off for him in more ways than one. But McMurtry, you know, I remember one time I was, you know, a poor student. I went into the bookstore and he had a collected edition of the works of Matthew Arnold, which I wanted, and for $38. I couldn't afford to pay it all, but he just said, well, come on in and you know, pay me when you can. So I did, but he would sit on a stool right by the entrance as you went in. He later went on and opened up a bookstore, or a bunch of bookstores in a whole town. He turned all the buildings into a bookstore in Texas. I don't know if you know that. But anyway, just getting back to that, I was thinking about, there's certain things that I don't really consider it a Western, quite honestly. And I could be wrong about that, and I'm open to being shown that I'm wrong, but I think of it more like kind of a domestic drama, like something you would see in Ibsen, or even you know, Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman or something, set in the West. But it doesn't really draw on the typical conventions of the Western, in my opinion. And when you think about, you know, Red River, which deals with the cattle drive, and that's celebrated as, you know, this epic journey from Texas to Kansas and everything that goes on, or with Shane, where you have this, where the cattlemen are the bad guys, so they're trying to drive the sodbusters out, and it's Shane who comes in and somewhat reluctantly ends up stopping all that. There's a heroic image in both of those, even though the perspective is different. In Red River, the cattlemen are considered to be, you know, American hero types, or at least larger than life figures. And in Shane, they're considered to be, you know, like capitalist villains or something, or maybe libertarian villains. They want the range open. They want to be able to have their cattle run wherever they want. And the sodbusters are fencing it in and preventing the cattle from roaming. In this movie, I think the cattle men are, you know, depicted more favorably, and certainly Melvyn Douglas has, or the character has, kind of an air of the, you know, of the qualities that you would see in you know, Tom Dunson, say, in Red River, that John Wayne played. But I don't really think that, you know, it carries forward. Certainly Paul Newman, the character, really you know, rejects all of that, and he's almost like he's too big for that town. You know, it's like he doesn't belong there. He should be somewhere else. This town is way too small for him, and he's under his father's thumb. You know, he's sitting around waiting for his father to die, basically, so he can take over the ranch. So the one thing that I think is really interesting, and someone's already pointed out how great the cinematography is, and you know, he won the Academy Award for it, undoubtedly, deservedly. He was a great cinematographer in any event. When you think about your normal Western landscapes, take John Ford's Monument Valley, for instance. This is the exact opposite of Monument Valley. It's flat. There's nothing that you look at and think, oh my God, that's beautiful. Or it's the kind of landscape that great people would have had to somehow do whatever they did in as a background. Or, you know, you think about Anthony Wayne's, not Anthony Wayne, Anthony Mann's landscapes in the Jimmy Stewart movies. They play an important role, and they underscore the you know, strenuousness of the efforts that these people are doing. You know, this landscape is flat, as somebody pointed out, dry, you know, looks somewhat arid. So I would say that's the only revisionist image I would think of in a Western. There's nothing you can look at and say, you know, this is the American West. I'm sure it is the American West, but not in the myth of the Western. So that's all I have to say about that. Anyway.
Yeah, John, thank you. There's a lot of great stuff in what you said. We're going to talk hopefully more about the concept of the Western and how this film is. You're right. It's a Western in that it is set in the West, but it does not have the traditional tropes that you mentioned. But very good. Darnice, who do we have next? We had a lot of.
We got Derek, Jan,
Okay.
and then Arthur.
Great.
Yeah, Derek.
You want to go first, Jan?
No, you go ahead, Derek.
Well, I don't. My comments aren't in direct response to what John
Okay.
said. So if yours are, you should go now. Because
No, it's okay.
my comments might
we
take
do
me
this-
in a different direction.
We do this all the time, Derek. We will go off in a different
okay.
direction and then wrap itself back up. So go ahead, Derek. It's fine.
Okay, so, well, what I thought about in terms of genre, rather than a Western, it kind of reminded me a bit of, I don't want to say melodrama, but it had a bit of the soap opera. I couldn't help but think of the TV show Dallas and wondering if they ever got inspired by this, because, you know, J.R. Ewing was sort of the villain that everyone loved to hate. Although I agreed with, I don't remember who said it, that I don't see Hud as a villain either. I think he was very complex, and I thought he did have a few redeeming qualities. And because he's not the one who caused the foot and mouth disease, I don't see him as the villain. You know, sure, he thought of some dirty dealings like selling the cattle out, just like J.R. Ewing might have done. And then, of course, there's the steamy affair type of, you know, womanizing. But what I appreciated about Hud is it definitely felt like the characters all had dimensions. Nobody was just a flat villain or a hero. They all had kind of a dark side to them or a past. I mean, when you look at Dallas, the characters are so one-dimensional archetypes. You either have Bobby Ewing, the knight in shining armor that has not a single flaw. He's so boring to watch. Yeah, he's good looking, but he's boring. He's not realistic. Or J.R. Ewing. Contrast, or like Miss Ellie, who's just like so naive, she doesn't see anything that's happening under her nose. But contrast that with the soap opera today on HBO, Succession, which I absolutely love. Many people would think there's no redeeming qualities about anybody on there, and I have to say I probably wouldn't enjoy Succession as much if it wasn't a satire. You know, if it was just a drama where we were really supposed to care about these people, but because it's a satire and it has something to say about human foibles and society and the dark side, that's what I love about Hud as well, is it had that kind of, I don't want to say a parable, but it just really dealt with an amazing message about whether to choose to be a good, honest person, or whether to, you know, to pass along your problems to someone else or figure out how to play the game. And the only last thing I want to say is, now that I've got 4 fabulous actors that I'm huge fans of now. I love Patricia Neal. It made so much sense that she married Roald Dahl, because a lot of his stories, particularly his adult stories, are these kind of satirical fables, you know, morality plays about, you know, be careful what you wish for. So I just think that was probably a marriage made in heaven, even though it sounds like they had some problems, but I could definitely see the attraction there. And just, I loved all the actors. I'm so impressed with all of them. I want to follow all their careers now. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Derek. There's a lot of great stuff in that. And that's the thing about this film. There's so much depth, not only in the story and the location, but the actors, as you mentioned. We could talk all night about all of this. And
well, I know you would love
maybe
to
we
talk
will.
all night about Patricia Neal, but that's another story.
Oh my goodness, I love Patricia.
Danny's got a big crush on her.
I do. Okay, who's next?
Okay, Dan, you're next.
Okay.
This is a great discussion tonight. Love it. The first time I saw HUD, I was Lon's age. Then eventually I got to be Paul Newman's age, and now I'm pushing Homer's age. It's interesting. You look at it from different perspectives as you get older. One of the things I love about this movie is, depending on the mood you're in, you can focus on each of the four main characters and it can be their story. And Andy's mentioned Patricia Neal and several other people. I'm wanting to know about what happened with her in the past and the cold-hearted bastard of a husband who left her in New Mexico. There's these wonderful backstories here. When I watched it this week, I felt how rigid and stern Homer could be and how hard it must have been to have been his sons. Yet at the same time, there is a basic decency to Homer that comes through and meant even more to me this time. There's a beautiful line in the movie that makes me realize this movie is as modern as a movie could be that is almost 60 years old. It's something like this. The look of the country changes depending on the men we admire.
Yep, I have it written down right here, Dan. It's one of my favorites.
It's close to that. Boy, have we lived through that in this country, especially in recent years. It's more pertinent than ever right now. I really enjoyed Paul Newman's performance this time because I got more into the complexities of it. He seemed to have this resentful respect of Homer, despite the fact that they could not stand each other. There's a scene where all the cattle have been killed except for the last two. And Homer's looking at the last two, thinking about what he's going to have to do because they were the basis of everything. He grew everything in his life out of those two cattle. And the government man shows up and he's planning on doing it himself. And Homer stops him. And then Whit Bissell, who is really, really good in that small role as, I think, Mr. Burris, the government guy. He is so good in that role and says, Mr. Bannon will take care of this. There's a point where HUD jumps in. The government man says something like, well, how do we know he's going to do it? And HUD says, he told you he would. As much as he can't stand Homer, there's a respect for him, I think, that still comes through. And there's enough complexity plus Paul Newman's charisma that you can see why he is so attractive. But I really enjoyed rewatching this movie again.
Great. Thanks, Jen. That's awesome.
Great comments, Jan. Thank you.
Arthur's next. Welcome.
Thank you. I have to say that several times I tried to watch HUD and something would come up where I wasn't able to finish it. But I finally finished it this morning, and I'm telling you, it is one fantastic movie. I've always been a big fan of Paul Newman. I was actually introduced to him and another character almost similar, Cool Hand Luke. The thing that I liked about this, I didn't like the character HUD, but I liked the performance. He was a man that wouldn't have a problem throwing anybody under the bus, including his nephew, if you saw earlier in the movie. He was really all about himself, as was brought out by his father later on into the movie when he explained why he didn't like HUD. And sometimes I wonder what made HUD the way he is. And I kind of assume, and I'm reading into this, that maybe he was more attached to his mother. And that when his mother, and made mention of his mother dying when they were very young, and maybe that's when he started to change. I do believe he loved his brother, and you know, it bothered him that he caused his brother's death. And he loved his nephew, even though his nephew looked up to him, and the nephew was totally unlike. But the fact that he had no really redeeming qualities and everything was displayed, was just magnificent acting. And, you know, I just learned about the short running time that Patricia Neal had in the movie. I didn't realize it because her scenes were short, but they were so well spread out through the movie, and she was so great in every scene she was in, including the final scene at the bus depot. You didn't realize, you know, like you could easily see like Beatrice straight 3-minute performance, you know, she was hardly in the movie, but
From Network, yeah.
Yeah. And but you didn't realize that Patricia Neal's part took up so little screen time until you read about it. Also, I thought Melvyn Douglas. I'm a Melvyn Douglas fan, so I like his stuff. I can go back to the stuff he did in the 30s and the 40s. I mean, I go as far back as The Old Dark House.
Yeah.
And it's all right. And to the last thing I saw him in, which ironically Patricia Neal was also in, was another horror film, The Ghost Story, which I thought he was very good in that too. But him playing the father, he was just so superb, and he definitely deserved that Oscar. And I thought, once again, Paul Newman was robbed. I always thought, oh, he was great in Color of Money. I think the Academy was kind of making up for all the other performances that he didn't get the award for. I mean, whether it was HUD, The Hustler, Cool Hand Luke, I mean, so many great performances. And it just, I mean, even The Verdict, I thought he was superb in The Verdict, you know, but it was just a magnificent movie. The cinematography by James Wong Howard was great. Every performance is good, even the smaller roles, like someone mentioned Whit Bissell, you know, who was a staple, not only in movies, but in TV. And he's always gave a good performance. So really, really enjoyed this movie.
Thank you, Arthur. Yeah, a lot of great stuff you said. Just, yeah, everybody's saying so many great things.
I know, so many things. Okay,
yeah.
We got Bill next, and then Jackie, does your hand up? Yeah. Okay. Bill? Yep, you.
So just to echo a little bit of what Dan said, this movie was very timely. I kind of wondered why this 1963 movie about a narcissist would be relevant, but it is extremely relevant to things that are going on today, generationally, value-wise. There were lines that you just said, whoa, they didn't write this then, they wrote it now. I thought that was very powerful. Not to be sexist, but to the ladies who want to forgive Paul Newman's character here. He was an alcoholic, he was a rapist, he was cruel. I can't find anything redeeming in him, even though you want to, because all the other roles that he's played, he's kind of an impish, you know, on the border of being a troublemaker, but he's always lovable. There's something lovable about him. But there's nothing in this movie that I can find lovable about him. That may be the way he looks, but I'm sorry, it's not my type.
I'm sure Martha's glad about that.
Yeah, I'm sure she is.
Okay, Jackie.
I have to follow that up, Phil, because maybe it's the way he looks. I have seen him in person from about 3 feet away at a gas pump in New Jersey. And I was stuck in the back seat of one of those cars where, the back seat doesn't have a door, only the front seat, and they wouldn't let me out. I said, let me go say hello. No, don't bother him. He really is that charming, honestly. He waved, he nodded and waved at me because I'm waving at the window going, ah! So I'm just saying, in real life, he has that charm. I'm not going to say much because you guys have covered an awful lot. I would mention, Jan, you say at the end of the movie, he's left with nothing. I would modify that a little, and I would say no one. He's left with no one, but he's got oil money coming. He's going to have all the things that money can buy, and he's going to be turned into that Texas guy that who's the rich oil guy and is still rude and narcissistic and all of that. But that's in Dallas, right? I can't remember. I think that was it. I think I agree. It was John who said, I think you're going to talk about that, Andy, whether it's a Western or not. I'm not a huge Western fan, but I like these kinds of things that are Western. I like Howard Hawks Westerns, Rio Bravo and the other one. But he does a lot of movies that have that dynamic between people, men and women and multiple people. So he has a lot to like in whatever he's doing, and Western just happens to be one of the genres he does. This one did feel to me like a Western. Maybe from the beginning, like someone mentioned, the beginning reminded me of Nebraska, the film we saw previously in this one, the cinematography, the pictures, the landscape, that kind of sets the mood. And then, you can't have a movie with longhorns in it and killing cows. You got to feel like, poor farmhands who are like, okay, you're out of a job, guys.
Yeah.
Just turn around and go away. So it did feel in some of those respects, it did. That's it, I want to say.
All right. Wow, what a brush with greatness, Jackie. Wow.
They wouldn't let me out of the car.
Oh,
She regrets it forever.
I hope you gave him a hard time for that for a long time.
Before I pick up with Jan and Sue, I wanted to say something myself. I was saying to Andy, I had seen HUD before, but I'd seen it on television and never remember seeing any part of that cattle scene. Like, I'm probably sure, it was one of those edited for TV versions. So that was very striking to me and very disturbing, sort of like what Bill said. But again, the cinematography of it was that it was suspenseful and almost thriller. Like you knew what was happening. You knew they were being shot. The way that it was put together was so very, like, I don't know, stunning to me, that it made it even more impactful. So I enjoyed that. And I kind of agree with you, Bill. Paul Newman is Paul Newman. So, he could do a million mean things and we would still think, oh, that's Paul Newman. But I did believe that he had moments where he was human. And I think that humanity part is the part that we're trying to say was endearing. Like, yes, I've had a horrible relationship with my father all my life, but I'm still his son and I still need to take care of him. And I still have that connection to him, whether I now found out that he never liked me from the beginning or not. I was always, from the first time I watched that, I wondered what happened to the women? What happened to Lonnie's mom? What happened to HUD's mom? What was the story behind that? And where was the nurturing influence in that family? If it was only Patricia Neal as the cook, then it was, there was a lot of things that were missing from that male triumvirate there that needed something. And I guess that's part of what I saw as someone had to have some nurturing or else that whole dynamic wouldn't work. And every now and then it'd be HUD, every now and then it'd be the dad. It was pretty much always the nephew. But that piece was I guess, those moments of like, okay, yes. Oh, you would feel this way because you're connected to them. And we know a lot of people that would just probably have left him on the side of the road. But I also found it interesting at the end, I wasn't quite sure if Lonnie was afraid to leave HUD alone with his grandfather. right? Or if the grandfather really didn't want Lonnie to go because he didn't want to be alone with HUD, it was a little tricky there. So I just wanted to add that in there. And now we'll go to Jan.
Well, at the risk of stealing your thunder, Andy, you said we were going to talk about Patricia Neal's character, but
Go
I
ahead.
would like to go into it a little bit. So I'm not talking about the actress's performance here. I'm talking about the character. I had a hard time to the very end with her character. I didn't like that when HUD was making all the innuendos at dinner, that she didn't speak up and say, oh, get lost, be quiet. I didn't like that the father wasn't stepping in and saying, leave her alone. I mean, it really bothered me. So I started to say, well, this is the 60s. Maybe women acted like that. Maybe they couldn't respond. But she was a tough character. I felt like she would have, put him in his place. Then what really bothered me, I think it was the first time he came to her bedroom area and was really, before the attack scene, was really, coming on strong when she gave him a cigarette. She wasn't telling him to get lost. And there were a lot of long looks, and it bothered me enough that I thought she's not rebuffing him enough. But it all came full circle at the end at the bus stop when she said, if you just acted different, you would have had a chance. That was a very revealing scene to me and very spoken from the heart. So I kind of came around full circle. I'm wondering how some of the other women feel about that. I felt she should have, stepped up earlier and said, leave me alone. I'm getting your dinners out here. I don't want to be bothered. It bothered me a lot until the very end. And then I thought, that's the character. And she wasn't necessarily rebuffing him. She not encouraging him, but yeah. I don't know. It's a thin line.
Well, before other people respond, I don't know if anybody's seen what Jan put in the chat, and I came across this in my research as well, that the character of Alma in the novel is an African-American woman. And I don't know how much of that character, Jan, you've read the book, you could probably tell us how much of that character translates to the Alma that we see on screen. Jan, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
I think Patricia Neal captures the essence of her, but boy, would it have been bold in 1963 to have a Black actress in that role as Alma, interacting with all those people, especially Paul Newman. They were just afraid to go there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jan, back.
If I can jump in, did she tell him to get lost? Like I'm mentioning during all these scenes before the attack scene, at any point, did she tell him to leave her alone?
I don't remember that she did, but I also don't think she had that Patricia Neal moment at the end at the bus stop where she told him, if you had just handled this differently, it would have happened naturally. I don't remember.
Interesting.
Okay, I think we had several folks that wanted to
respond. We had a couple
of
people jump up before that. So
great.
I know we had Sue that wanted to talk before we got into the Alma thing. So let's grab her and then we can go back to the other comment.
Well, yeah, I have several things. In fact, I have so much to say. I'm just going to try to keep it real short. But in terms of Alma, I got the feeling that she was attracted to him, and one could, in real life, know something like that. And I do think, I went to school in Kansas in the 60s, so I know a lot about the prairie, but women there might not be totally protected, but they wouldn't necessarily tolerate language like he was doing. They had a right to say that's enough. But I also think that the people doing the film kind of got it somewhat wrong. They didn't have her character totally right. But I go along with Jan. Those last lines were a good reflection of what might have happened. I wanted to comment on two weird things. When I was watching this, it struck me there were several scenes where I went, I felt like I was channeling James Dean, like East of Eden, where the son, the younger son, is just malevolent, really malevolent, and Giant, where the guy is left all by himself, lonely. And it's like, I was like, well, this seems kind of derivative to me. But I mean, it wasn't, but it's that kind of character that lives in the life. I still don't think he had what would be truly a psychopathic personality, because a psychopathic person would not run over to the side of the road or care at all. They would stand back and go, ho, ho, ho. And it just, that is not the case. So he does have some humanity. And last but not least, I want to say something about the cows. I mean, the cattle, because out there they're called cattle, which I found out when I lived in Kansas. They're not cows, they're cattle. Those longhorns came up through the Spanish conquistadors and went wild, and they were out in the range, and people came along and cultivated them, or whatever they could get them to do to be more docile. But in fact, the character of those longhorns was a very sweet temperament. They were not mean or ferocious. They did not throw people around on their horns. So they were the type of cattle you develop a relationship with and you care about. And so those cattle were very special. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, okay, so we got a list. We've got Debbie, then Bill, then Jeff, then Arthur. Uh-oh.
Okay, should I go?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I noticed about this movie is that it kind of reminded me a little bit of No Country for Old Men, in that the older, the father there seemed to be out of step with the world a little bit, you know, kind of like, I can see how back in the 60s, a younger generation might have perceived him as being square or out of step. But by today's standards, to me, he's a guy who, and being older now, he's a guy who is looking at the world and saying, man, you know, I'm getting too old for this. What's going on? And kind of seeing his way of life maybe sort of dying off a little bit, you know, because, you know, he's talking about oil fields and stuff, and he doesn't want anything to do with that. He wants to stick with nature or cattle or whatever. And another thing, Paul Newman, he might be charming and everything, and I love Paul Newman. I think he's a great actor, but I was not charmed at all by him in this movie, not even a little bit. He was just really horrible in my opinion. And I know he has redeeming qualities, but still, what a jerk. And as far as like Patricia Neal, I thought that she kind of enjoyed his attention, but didn't want to encourage him. And I thought that at that time, the way she handled it seemed consistent with her character. It was like, okay, I'm not going to take this guy seriously. You know, it's like, oh, well, it's all very flattering, but you know, we're not going there. And then he just comes busting in and starts, you know, basically raping her. And it's, you know, at that point, it's kind of like, okay, you've really blown it this time. And if this guy is such a big deal and so wonderful, how come he isn't off finding a job for himself instead of working for his dad, who he claims to hate? Okay, all those things there are things that I was thinking during the movie. Anyway, I enjoyed the movie very much, and I thought I kept calling him the kid. What's his name again?
Lonnie in the movie, yeah.
Yeah. Fantan.
Yeah. I kept thinking he's really the protagonist here, because he's the one who has to decide how he's going to react to Hud. You know, he admires Hud, and at the same time is not so sure he shouldn't admire Hud. And then finally he says, look, I'm out of here. You know, I'm going to find something for myself. And basically Hud is left at the end. He may have oil and he may have money, but he's going to have nobody. He's going to end up being as lonely and bitter as his father was, essentially. That's the way I saw it. So anyway, those are just a few of my thoughts about the movie.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
All right, so we have Bill Secoria left next.
So one very unrealistic thing about the movie, and really it destroys some of the premise. The one cow dying, and then none of their cattle got sick, but the blood drawn from that cow was made other cows sick, and that's how they made the diagnosis, yet none of their other cattle got sick for the 2 weeks that they were doing this, that their cattle would have started dropping like cows. I mean, that was unrealistic, sorry. And also the scene where the father is about to shoot the two longhorns, and he walks into the pen. How did they get, I think the Academy Award should go to those two steers who were looking at him as if, oh my God, you're kidding me. I thought that they did computer graphics to give him those looks, but those looks were priceless on those animals. It was amazing. They deserve Academy Awards too. And then, sorry to make a social comment, but I have to. Be real careful about labeling the victim as the cause of a crime because of their earlier behavior. Nope, sorry, he doesn't get a free ticket because of that. He's a criminal.
Okay.
Thank you for saying that, Bill, because I've been thinking that the entire time. I do feel like that was sort of the, she asked for it kind of scenario, which wasn't the case. I do feel that he was so easily triggered that, and I have to say, I was watching this with my daughter, and there were a couple of scenes where she said some things that some of you were saying, like, I think with Sue were saying that he wasn't a psychopath, and because my daughter was like, they're out there shooting those horses. It'd be really easy for him to shoot his dad off that horse. I mean, they were out shooting the cattle. He could just turn around and shoot his dad off the horse, and he'd be done. Like, that's the kind of crazy man, that's what a psychopath would do. And then she also said something about the scene that said, if the only women that he's attracted to are the ones that aren't obtainable because they're married and they don't want a commitment, the only way that he could seduce Alma was by taking her, because he had to do something to make that relationship not a relationship. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point. And what you brought up, Bill, kind of made me think the same thing. It's like, it wasn't really her saying, yeah, I'd be open to it. So it's, why didn't she stand up for herself? We were both also saying, scream. Why aren't you screaming? Why aren't you screaming? Please scream. You don't want this. Please stop. So that was a little disturbing to me too. So I'm glad you brought that up, Bill. Okay, I'm gone. Now Jeff and then Arthur.
Just to follow up on what Bill said there, way to go, Andy, for programming a movie that has a pandemic in it.
Glad I could help.
Haven't had enough of that. No. I just wanted to talk, first of all, a few people here have talked about Patricia Neal, and I've always been a fan of her, but I love her in this movie because she has this kind of grown-up sensuality thing going there. I find her very sexy in this movie for whatever reason, and I can see why HUD is kind of, what's going on with that one? I like that one. And I think the interplay between her and Newman, I think, is brilliant. There's a scene there where he kind of sneaks up behind her and puts his arms around her. And if you look in her eyes, right when he does that, like, there's definitely, like, she likes this guy. Like, she's attracted to him. She's aroused. And it goes to what Jan was saying about, he's just a lug, like, so she's not adverse to sleeping with him, but she just, have some subtlety here, have some class. And that's what she says at the end there, like, basically, it was going to happen, like, eventually it would have happened. You just had to don't be a dickhead about it, And we haven't talked much about Brandon deWilde in this, but to me, he's the fulcrum of the whole movie. He's to me the thrust of the movie is that he's this young soul, you know, this blank slate, and where is he going to go? Is he going to be seduced by Hud and the hedonism, or is he going to be like his grandfather and just turn into a decent person? And like, because he's very clearly is like intrigued by Hud, and you know, I think there's the scene where they're in the bar, and he's looking at the girl there, and Hud says, yeah, why don't you go for that, you know? And he makes this comment that which very easily could have come out of Hud's mouth. He goes, I'd like to take the long way home with that one, or something like that. So he has that in him, but to me, he's the central thrust of the movie is which way is he going to go? Is he going to be with his grandfather, or is he going to turn into another heel like Hud? I also wanted to talk, a couple of people have mentioned James Wong Howe here, and I just love the dusty, flat look of this movie. And if you want to talk about James Wong Howe, another one of my favorite films of his is Sweet Smell of Success. And just another brilliantly shot movie. But if you put these two movies side by side, like they could not be starker, the difference between the two of them. So I just think he does some brilliant work in this. And I think that's all I have to say tonight.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, Arthur, had your hand up?
Yeah, going back to Patricia Neal's character, I felt that you could see that she was attracted to Hud. And even after the attempted rape, she was still, if you saw her at the bus depot, the way she was looking at him. And I think his feelings for her were somewhat mutual, because two things he did. One, he apologized and for what he had done. And also, as the bus was pulling away, he said, "You'll always be known as the one who got away." So that showed there that there was some feelings there. Also, that I wanted to say something about her feelings toward Brandon deWilde. Remember the scene when she came to wake him up? And it was he made it clear that he was wearing nothing, but she kept tickling him. And I felt that, you know, someone said earlier that the Brandon deWilde character was supposed to be gay, but I don't know about that. It's more of a coming of age story, and he was attracted to Patricia Neal's character, whereas Patricia Neal may have been attracted to him too, a little bit, but you know, she allowed her maturity to step in. Another thing that I saw was that I couldn't help watching this movie and comparing it to another modern day movie that had a Western setting called Lonely Are the Brave. I think that would make a good movie night to watch these two movies together. And like I said, and that's a good one to have a discussion about. There's a lot of things you could come up with out of that movie. There was one more thing I wanted to say, but it slipped my mind. So, but anyway, I really enjoyed myself here tonight with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. That's a great recommendation. Lonely Are the Brave. It's amazing. Kirk Douglas is very similar to the Hud's character in that film. Yeah, great. Who do we have next?
That was it, unless somebody else has something else to add.
Wow, we've been going for over an hour, and it seems like it's just been a few minutes.
Yeah, and I feel like there were some things that you had wanted to bring up that maybe we didn't do it, but now also I see hands shooting up. It's Jan and John. So
yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
This is nothing major, but in the chat, Andy mentioned that charming scene in the movie theater where Lonnie and Homer are there and everybody's singing Clementine. Andy mentioned in the chat that a lot of directors, that would have been cut from the final version of the movie. But to me, that's Martin Ritt all over. He's got a similar scene in another movie called Murphy's Romance which is a far more gentler movie. There's a scene at the beginning where James Garner, the main character, picks up a hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker is played by Charles Lane, who is in probably every single Frank Capra movie in the 30s.
Yeah.
And you know him in I Love Lucy and all kinds of TV shows. There's about a 5 or 6 minute scene at the start of that movie where the two of them are simply talking in James Garner's truck. It doesn't push the plot forward, but it says something about that character, and the same character like Homer. And I'm just glad moments like that are in the movie.
Thank you, Jan. That's great.
John, and then Arthur.
You talk about movies in movies. One of the best known examples is Sullivan's Travels, which is really a pivotal moment in that movie, because that's when Sullivan realizes that he shouldn't try to make Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, but he should make a movie that people would actually enjoy. Of course, then the Coen brothers came along years later and made Oh Brother, Where Art Thou. The other thing I just wanted, the reason I raised my hand, I don't know if anybody mentioned it in chat, but it struck me, both Paul Newman and Patricia Neal, they're born a year apart. They were almost 40 when they made this movie, and they just don't seem that way at all. I mean, I did not see any signs of incipient middle age in either one of those characters. It was really remarkable to think they were that old. Not that 40's old, but I just thought they were probably in their 30s and mid 30s maybe, but they were actually in their, I think, a year or so away from being 40 when the movie was released anyway.
Yeah. Great, John. Thank you.
Okay, so we got Arthur, then Bill.
But one thing I meant to mention in my last comment was the ending where the Brandon the Wild character, Lon, didn't want to have nothing to do with HUD. He was going to go out on his own. And I saw that it showed that he matured because he finally saw HUD for the way he really was. He didn't see him the way, what do you call that expression, rose-colored glasses? He was no longer in denial. And I thought that was pivotal. And that's why I refer to this movie also as a coming-of-age story for the Lon character.
Absolutely.
Okay, Bill, then Jeff.
So the movie was set in the early 60s. I don't remember singing in movie theaters at that time, or when I was a kid. So was that a regional thing? Was that, what was that? I never seen it at all. So where does that win and where did that happen?
I may be wrong. Jan could probably tell us, and maybe John too, not because of your age, but because of your movie knowledge. I think that was something that happened a little bit earlier, that probably in the 50s, that was more relevant. But this seems like a town where things move slowly. And maybe that trend is just getting there, to that theater or to that part of the country. I know that was a very popular thing. I never saw it when I was growing up either, but guys, what do you have a take on that?
It was not at all. I mean, if you went on a Saturday when I was a kid, you'd see a double feature, and then there would be a short with a bouncing ball. And I forget how much the seats were, but like a dime or something like that. So the theater was filled, and everybody would sing along, and the ball would bounce as it went across, and everybody already knew the tune. It was just a question of keeping time together.
Yeah.
Jen.
We definitely did not see that in Mississippi when I was growing up. I think Andy's right. I think it was probably about 7 or 8 years before I was born that it was probably a very constant thing.
Okay, Jeff.
I just wanted to, Arthur just mentioned something which just twigged a light bulb in my head, and I can't believe I wouldn't have thought of this before, about Brandon deWilde walking away at the end of the movie. If you think back to Shane leaves this family situation after he's done his work, and he doesn't technically have to leave, but he's imposed that on himself, that my work here is done, I'm going to leave. And I just wondered if that was a conscious thing to have Brandon deWilde basically do the same thing at the end of this movie. You know, he could have stayed, like HUD asks him to stay, he wants him to stay, but he says, no, I have to go. This
Wow.
Very good thought, Arthur. I never thought of that.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I never thought of that either.
Well, if you think about it, even Patricia Neal's character didn't have to leave, but she needed to go, right? I mean, she didn't have to stay in their house and be their cook. She could have stayed in town. She could have been there, but she needed to leave too. So,
yeah,
you know, like you said, he was left with no one, but that's probably how he wanted, since his dad said that he didn't care for anyone. So if you don't care for anyone, you don't need anyone, right?
That's right.
Great discussion, guys.
Super discussion, and it's not over yet, because I know you guys have already had some great recommendations, but let me kick off a couple of recommendations and we'll turn it over to your recommendations. Again, many of these we've already had some great ones. So as I mentioned earlier, a good companion piece to this film is The Last Picture Show from 1971, directed by Peter Bogdanovich. It contains some tremendous performances by everyone, like this film. But supporting Oscars went to Cloris Leachman, who passed away earlier this year. And I think, as Arthur mentioned, to Ben Johnson, another actor who earned an Oscar for a very short amount of screen time. In this film, it's less than 10 minutes. Now, this movie isn't on Canopy, but it is on DVD from the library. That's The Last Picture Show from 1971. And you want more Paul Newman? No problem. Newman's career was just absolutely jam-packed with tremendous performances, but as someone else had already mentioned, my favorite is 1982's The Verdict, in which he plays a drunken lawyer who takes a case he has no business taking. I think, and there were a lot of great performances, I think this is Newman's greatest performance of his career. This one is also on DVD from the library, but not on Canopy. And it will come to no surprise to Darnice or any of you that, you know, I'm always up for some more Patricia Neal. So if you've never seen it, you must see A Face in the Crowd from 1957. Patricia Neal plays a radio journalist who discovers a talented singer in an Arkansas jail, helps to propel him to national stardom, then watches as his celebrity status gains him so much power, he begins to influence the entire country, and not for good. Sound familiar? The talented singer from the jailhouse is named Lonesome Rhodes, played by Andy Griffith. And if you only know him from the Andy Griffith Show and Matlock, you are in for a big surprise. We showed this movie at the library a few years ago, and it stunned the audience. And again, this was not on Canopy, but it is on DVD from the library. Okay, let's hear your recommendations.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to jump in because my dinner is almost ready. I have two. I didn't really talk about Melvyn Douglas in this, but I just think he's great in this. So I wanted to throw out another very criminally underknown Melvyn Douglas role, and that's a film from 1970 called I Never Sang for My Father.
Yes.
With he plays Gene Hackman's father. He's a kind of a overbearing and possessive father. His wife dies, and he expects Gene Hackman to stay around and look after him, and Hackman has other ideas. So that's one. I don't think it's on Canopy. It's not super easy to see, but you should look it up. It's called I Never Sang for My Father. The other one is from Britain, and it's kind of got a female HUD in it. I think it's from 1965. About a model who kind of parties and sleeps her way to the top. And it's called Darling, with Julie Christie, directed by John Schlesinger. Very great film. I think she won the Best Actress for that. So you should look that up as well, Darling.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I saw that for the first time this year, Jeff, and I hated that character, but it was such a good movie. Okay, who's next?
Arthur, you good? There you go.
I can recommend some Patricia Neal performances. I liked her in someone already mentioned, A Face in the Crowd, and that's a great performance. But I also liked her in this movie with her, and I think Eleanor Parker is one of the other actresses. It's called Three Secrets. And I think you'd like that one. I think The Fountainhead with her and Gary Cooper is outstanding. But one that that I thought was really fantastic, it was just on TV the other day. It was called The Subject Was Roses. And she made this after her stroke. And Jack Albertson from Chico and the Man was the husband, and he got an Oscar for his performance. And Martin Sheen played the son. It was probably one of his earliest roles. Another one Paul Newman movie that I liked that was made late in his career, even since The Verdict, that I highly recommend is called Nobody's Fool. This has a lot of humor in it, and it's almost worth watching for the scenes with him and Bruce Willis alone. You know, and at that time, Bruce Willis was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but he was willing to take a small supporting role, and he kept getting showed up by the Paul Newman character, and it is a hilarious and great film. Brandon deWilde, he didn't make that many movies, but the ones I saw him in, Will Shane and HUD notwithstanding, there's another little movie he did called Blue Denim. If you happen to run across that one, watch it. And then there was one, I can't find it anywhere. I remember seeing it in the theaters. They showed it on TV a couple of times. It wasn't bad. It was a spaghetti Western with an all-star cast. This was probably one of his last performances. It was called The Deserter. And it had Brandon deWilde. The leading actor was from Turkey or somewhere, but he had American actors like Richard Crenna, Chuck Connors, even John Huston did an acting performance in it. Wow. And Ian Bannon. It had a great cast. It was a good movie. Hopefully it'll find its way on home video someday. And of course, Melvyn Douglas. You can't go wrong with Melvyn Douglas or anything. It's recent as Ghost Story and Being There, you know, even though Nanotska, The Old Dark House. He did so many great movies. So just about anything, you can't go wrong with him.
All right. That's a great list, Arthur.
Yeah, like, great way to wrap it up.
That's
Jan,
fantastic.
Your hand up again, or is that from before?
Here's a couple of films that I think Andy has probably written about. They're from the Film Noir Foundation, a couple of new restorations. These are excellent films. If you're into something different that's international, these two are a couple of the most unexpected films I've ever come across. Andy, can you talk a little bit about them?
Can't
I
really
can.
see.
Yes, those are these are both films from Argentina that have just been released from a company called Flicker Alley. That's the same company that gave us the permission to watch a better version of Tolerable David a while back. So the Bitter Stems, I'm not kidding when I tell people this. This is in my top 10 film noir ever. This is such an amazing movie. It was almost lost, completely lost. There's a whole story about it. I could send you guys a blog post about it if you like, but it's such a tremendous film noir. And even if you're not a huge film noir fan, it doesn't really matter because the story is so good. I don't want to tell you any more about it because it's over. The Beast Must Die is a Argentine version of a novel called The Beast Must Die by Nicholas Blake. And Nicholas Blake was a pen name for I can't remember the gentleman's first name, but it's Daniel Day-Lewis's father wrote the novel. So this is a revenge story film noir. Both of these are absolutely tremendous films. I would not hesitate to pick those up at all. Thank you, Jen, for mentioning those. Those are just tremendous. Who do we have next, Darnese?
We had Arthur put up his hand, and I think that was it. Oh, and John, sorry.
One more.
Oh, Sorry, go ahead. John first and then Arthur.
Oh, John.
It's Cecil Day Lewis.
That's it. Thank you, John.
If anybody wants to see a movie that's more recent in the vein of HUD, you might want to take a look at High Low Country, which Woody Harrelson plays a figure very much like Paul Newman in some respects. And like Paul Newman, well, I say unlike Paul Newman, who doesn't really dominate as an actor because all the other actors are so good. He really dominates it. Sam Elliott has a little cameo appearance in it. It was directed by a British director, but it's set in the West. It's one of those Dying of the West movies. A Paul Newman movie, which I really liked, I actually saw it on the big screen when it came out, was Twilight. I don't know if anybody else has seen it. James Garner is in it. It's not the kind of movie that you're going to walk home and say, oh my God, what a great movie. But it's one of those movies that kind of penetrates you after you watch it. It gives you a lot to think about. It's a very human movie. It deals with very unrelatable human interactions, which I often think Hollywood doesn't really get, but they did in this movie. And then one last movie that I saw many years ago, and I just think it's a wonderful movie. It's very hard to see, but you should keep your eyes out for it because I think it is on TV every once in a while, called Birch Interval. Eddie Albert stars as a head of it's set in Pennsylvania, Dutch country. And it's just a really charming, beautifully shot movie by Delbert Mann, who I never really thought had that great an eye, but he does in this. It's a very wonderful movie, and very, very poignant. So I'd mention that.
Great. You know, one day we should just have a program where we just talk about recommendations, like for a full hour. We could easily do it.
There are so many of us that we would just be doing this forever, and then somebody would say something like, "Oh yes, and that one. Oh and yes, and that one." Oh, it would take hours.
That's okay.
Sorry about that, Arthur. Go ahead.
Okay. Speaking of recommendations, and then Melvyn Douglas, I got one more that I highly recommend. It's unlike anyone that was mentioned today. It's a movie Roman Polanski stars in called The Tenant, and not only is Melvyn Douglas in it, but also Jo Van Fleet, who's a tremendous actress and underrated. It is a very good movie. It's very dark, and I think you could watch it on Canopy. I'm not sure, but it is available on DVD, and I think it's available for streaming, like on Amazon or something like that. But I highly recommend it. The Tenant.
All right, thank you. All right, I think we all have enough movies to keep us busy for a little while. Mm-hmm. Wow, I mean, we've had some good discussions before, but tonight was just on a whole nother level. So, wow, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless.
Way to end the year.
Way to end the year. I'm telling you, this is really, really tremendous. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And yeah, I look forward to starting off 2022. It's going to be a great year. And I hope everybody, if I don't see you before then, I hope you have a wonderful holiday and a great new year. And we will be back on January the 14th with Miss Barbara Stanwyck, and we'll see what she's got to show us, which will be another great performance.
Does she show us legs like she did in Great Balls in Balls of Fire?
I'm not going to tell you anything. just watch it.
All right.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you all again.
We'll feel lucky to have you, Suzanne. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this weekend. And we really appreciate this.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, everybody. Be safe. Have a great holiday. Work in a few movies.
Definitely.